Great. Good morning, everybody. It's great to have you with us. It's a wonderful way to start off the morning in terms of gaining resources to help students. So thanks for being here. My name is Gail Holt. I am the Dean of Financial Aid at Amherst College. I have been at Amherst College for nearly 10 years, but I've been a financial aid professional for more than a quarter century. So I love helping families. I've been using the CSS Profile for some time and do find that it's a very important and valuable tool for our families. So we will dive right in. I'm sure you're familiar with the Zoom features and how to get everything settled on your side and asking questions, but here is a little bit more information and reminders to some of the features if you need them. I am happy to partner with MEFA because they're a long-standing partner in bringing important information to you as counselors, to families, and our partnership brings expertise from folks in the field, both you and us on the financial aid and college side, to families and their nonprofit status and all their tools really are helpful to families. So we hope that you either share that with families, connect on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you find the most help. The webinars, the emails that can be shared with families to receive from MEFA really help with some timely reminders. So we're happy to be a partner in this. So today we're going to focus on the profile application. And the profile application is brought to us by the College Board, but it really came out of a partnership with colleges and universities. Basically, a few hundred colleges and universities that were seeking to utilize a significant amount of financial aid and distribute it to students, and do so in a way that really distinguished the financial abilities or lack of abilities from families in a way that was greater than what the federal formula could provide in the federal application. So most of the colleges, all of the colleges really that use the CSS profile also must use the FAFSA, because the FAFSA is the only application that can be used to determine eligibility and award federal funds. But because federal funds aren't enough to fully support a college education at some more expensive institutions, the profile is used as well. So the profile will be used to distribute the billions of dollars across the institutions that are awarding institutional funds. The good news is that the profile opens at the same time as the FAFSA, so you may be familiar with October 1st as the time that the FAFSA opens, and the profile opens at the same time. The other advantage of the profile is that it is available for both domestic students who can file the FAFSA, but also international students. So international students cannot use the FAFSA if they're not a US or eligible non-citizen. And so the profile can be used to still collect information from those students and determine eligibility for institutional funds as well. So I started to talk about the detailed information. I think it's that detailed information that really, I think discourages or can, create some complexity for families and worry. But that complexity really goes two ways. We like to really see it as helping students because it gives us more information. I always say that the most the perfect way to determine eligibility for financial aid would be to conduct an interview with each family. Unfortunately, none of us is able to do that. So we are utilizing the profile, which has customized questions and more detail, to really try to understand fully what are the struggles that families are experiencing. And one of the first things the profile can do, unlike the FAFSA, is that the profile can collect special circumstance information, a little bit of narrative that families want to share with us. So that's important. The FAFSA does not have any capability for families to add narrative. So the profile is one application that can get sent to many schools, and families only have to type that information in once. So families are going to start on the CSS Profile.org website, which is within the College Board's sphere. It's important to point out to families, the College Board is constantly looking for ways to improve the profile. So the website is offered in Spanish. And so, expanding the accessibility for all kinds of families is one of those initiatives. For students that are in high school right now, they will be completing the 23, that are seniors in high school, I should say, will be completing the 23-24 application. So the application always is going to be for the year that the student is going to be in a college or a university. And so that would be also the same for the FAFSA. But right on the website, you can find the list of schools that do require the profile. There's also a webinar, which really for families that want the more detail about how to complete the profile, or if you want to go through that, you can do that from their site. And the non-custodial piece, so parents who are not married to each other, the biological parents for students, they do need to complete the profile, both parents do, so that's different than the FAFSA as well. And so there's some customized information there as well on the College Board CSS Profile site. The resources that are offered are important. The creating the account is important. Students may have an account with the College Board through their SAT completion. They can use that account, but if they would choose to, they can create a profile, an account through the CSS Profile site. I'll explain in a little bit why I think it's best just to keep using their SAT site, but parents will need to create an account so that they can complete their information. And there'll be an account for each of the custodial and the non-custodial parents, if that is the case. Now, there are always those cases where the biological parents of the student are not married, and the family relationship does not exist between the student and that other parent, the non-custodial parent. When that relationship is harmful to the student, we know that there's usually often there cannot be a relationship between the parents themselves. But if there is a relationship between the student and the non-custodial parent, then the non-custodial profile will need to be completed. But if there is a breakdown in that relationship, estrangement, abuse, then every school has a process to receive requests to waive the non-custodial parent financial information. And so there is one form on the CSS site in which students can fill out that request and then only have to send it individually to the schools. So that's easier than having to do an individual process with each school. Another important benefit of access regarding the CSS profile is that the College Board continues to expand fee waivers for students for whom the cost of submitting this fee-based application would be a financial burden. And so the fee waivers will highlight the benefits or the reality of those, but they keep expanding in terms of eligibility and the number of schools. So those are all good news. I would say that this page and section in terms of participating institutions and programs is very important because not only does it list the schools that utilize the profile, and it gives their corresponding school code to use when completing the profile, but it also includes information about other kinds of requirements that each school may be utilizing. So who is the school asking to complete the CSS profile? Is it just domestic students, or is it domestic and international students? Not every school will require the non-custodial parents' information, so students will definitely want to be specific about who will require that information. And then IDOC, we will also highlight, is the document imaging. So that's where schools can ask students and families to upload the supporting document for the information that they're putting on the profile. And what this does, I know it's another step, but it really makes sure that families are reporting the correct information. That's our goal. We know that the form is complex, and we know that sometimes families aren't super familiar with their tax forms. So by collecting the tax forms, we can make sure that if they reported something in error, it's just easier and faster for us to make that correction. So in terms of the process, as I said, the student can sign in with their College Board account. The benefit here is that if the student has already received a waiver for the SAT, then that information is already going to be included in that account. And so they can, continue, it's a little bit easier to do that. But parents are going to create a student account. And the reason it's a student account is because it's the student's profile. The parents are adding their information to it, but it's really the student's account and then the parents' information. So they should be thinking about it in that way. The profile application is customized. So the whole goal is that no student is asked questions that aren't necessary. So if there are sections that are not applicable based on the schools that the student has entered in terms of needing and sending the profile application to, then they won't be asked for that information. And we as schools, we go through a options setup, basically, where we're saying exactly what information do we use. So until a student adds a school that requires certain information, then at that point they would be asked for it. So one of the things that's important is if a student completes the profile and then they add schools later, they do need to go back and make sure that there's not any additional information that they would need for that particular school. But so that yes, it's one more step, but it is designed to make it as seamless as possible for the student from the get-go. We're really trying to reduce the number of questions that any single student is asked. And there's lots of other just benefits to easing and making the student experience better, making sure that it's clear that when a section is completed, it's green. They're able to jump around if it makes sense for them to go from one section, income, to maybe the household information or the assets. They can change those sections. They do not have to complete the profile in one sitting. So it can be a lot to do, but if you start the application and then need to take a break, certainly can and can start back up when you log in. The application is mobile friendly, which these days, helps for people using all kinds of different devices. I think it just becomes probably a matter of real estate and screen size. So certainly, using advising on tips in terms of saving the work as you go along is important. It's very frustrating when any of us enter data and then find out that it's been timed out. So, hitting that save and continue is important. There have been, in addition to this enhanced user experience, there have been many hints and notes on each question. So, families and students will find that if they don't understand what is being asked for on a question or why it's being asked for, there are some of those hints and notes that help to explain why colleges need this information or exactly what they're looking for. So I hope that part of the user experience will really lessen some of the anxiety. It is an intrusive process, asking a lot of personal information, but hopefully that is helpful. Again, trying to limit how overwhelming the process is. If things don't apply, then that question is going to be, the detail of it's going to be shorter. But if a student or parent, enters certain information, the question may expand because maybe more information is needed at that point. So, they should answer all the questions that they can, but certainly if they can't, then a 0, it doesn't apply, is certainly acceptable. We do recommend that students are including all information when they're filing these applications, including the Social Security number. I know that the Social Security number is a sensitive topic, but when it comes to applying for financial aid, we need to match students with their personal information. So in our electronic systems, we need to be sure that we've matched an application with a student and in behind the scenes, and the Social Security number helps us to do that. So the parents, again, sometimes I hear people say, well, why are you asking, why is there so much information? Sometimes, the detail of the information helps to distinguish and personalize the information. So all parents and step parents will be requested on the form so that we can be clear with students, what information do we need and who do we need it from and what don't we need. So it's just as important to put information about a step parent for those of us who maybe will actually separate that information out. So reporting all the parents, reporting legal guardians, those are reported, which is another difference from the FAFSA. And if the student is currently married, their spouse information also gets included. So the student will list the colleges, and once they list the colleges, then it can be clear if that college is going to require the non-custodial parent information. The student will supply an email address for the non-custodial parent, and then they will get some information about how then they need to create an account and log in and submit the information, because the information is separate and secure. So each of the parents in a non-married situation, they would not be able to access the other parent's information, and that's why there's 2 separate accounts. In addition, there have to be 2 separate email addresses. Families aren't going to be able to use one email address for each individual, either each parent or the student. So that's important to know. So as I said, there are cases where a non-custodial parent is not available. Maybe the parent has abandoned the child, there's no contact. And so that information can also be reported. And the profile will collect information to explain why that information is available. Collecting that information allows the application to just skip any additional questions. If the information is just not provided, there could be some other situations that the student can indicate the reason that they are not providing and can't provide non-custodial information, and that may be separate from a situation where they're just asking for a waiver. So we're trying to provide as many scenarios as possible to apply to families. But if there is a relationship between the student and the non-custodial parent, then they receive that email. They do go to the same site, but as I said, they need to create their own account. The link to being able to create that account is the College Board Fin ID, Fin Aid ID it's called, so the financial aid ID, and that ID is included in the email, but the student can also access that information and give it to the parent. So again, just to reinforce, it's a student account with parent information. So when creating that, the parent should be putting in the student's information, not their own. And again, as I said, this information is secure. Colleges see it, but other parents cannot. In terms of order, it has to start with the student. The application has to start with the student because they have to add a college. And as I said, the non-custodial piece is not going to be relevant unless a college that requires that non-custodial information is part of the selection. Parents, non-custodial parents, can use a fee payment code, and a fee payment code is different than a profile waiver. The profile waiver is just that there's, meeting the requirements to not have to pay. A fee payment code is actually a code that's being given to the student or the parent by either an organization or a college, and that basically covers the fee. Essentially, somebody else is paying the fee for the applicant. I already talked about the email addresses. They have to be different email addresses. So what kind of information is provided on the profile? It's very similar to information that's on the FAFSA, although as I said, it is more detailed. For the coming year, the 2021 income will be utilized, and so that should be information that's already readily available. Those tax returns were generally speaking already filed, so that would be will be required. In terms of the coming income information, families should have knowledge of that information as well. But again, in trying to simplify and reduce the complexity, the 22 and the 23 income information is only asked if families report that there are changes. If they answer, the question that there are no expected changes in their income for 22 or 23, then that information is not going to be asked. So in the past, they had to put all that information in regardless. And again, this is trying to simplify that. Always, asset questions are always about what is present day information and detail. The household member information is very important. These are members that live in the custodial household, are being supported by the custodial household. In terms of non-custodial parents, they're going to also be including the children, their other children with that spouse. It doesn't matter if the student lives with them, but if they're the children that are shared with the other parent, then they will report those children as well. And the number of children in college is also collected. So really this, trying to collect as much information about income and assets and expenses. I can't highlight enough that expenses are important. Expenses are not part of the FAFSA application. So income is going to be a composite of all of the forms of household income. What are all the sources of income that are going into the resources that families have to pay their expenses? So that's going to be both taxable and untaxable income.
Gail, can you just expand on the income and reporting future income. So if a parent is expecting like the cost of living raise, is that something that would mean a difference in their projected income?
Thank you so much. That's a fantastic question. And no, routine cost increases, I would say, should not be included, because there is an expectation that income probably will increase a little bit, expenses will increase a little bit. So each year, excuse me, the formula does adjust to account for routine changes. So when I say we're expecting changes in future years, I am thinking about there's been a loss of employment, or there's been new employment and the salary is much higher, or I'm expecting a significant bonus in the coming year. So I would really say income that's more than $5,000 or $10,000, probably more like 10,000, but depending on what's relative, changes are really what we're talking about in terms of those futures. Because what is it? It's certainly important to forecast a lower income that can open up a conversation between the family and the colleges. But forecasting higher income, that maybe the parent was unemployed in 21, and maybe they got a higher paying job in 22. If there's going to be a considerable jump, it's important for the colleges to engage with the family, to talk about the planning needed in terms of what to expect. At our school, we put messages on our award letters, and many schools do that. And so some of those messages may be able to say, we see that there's been some changes ahead. Your aid is still based on the current information, but we'd like to talk with you about planning for those changes. So it's really trying to open up and create a solid, thoughtful financial planning process. Assets on the profile are a little bit different than they are through the FAFSA. The primary home is included. Business and farm for all families are included. And also assets that are held in the names of children. Again, this isn't just trying to get a full comprehensive look at what is the full situation of a family. And I can see counselors saying, well, why would you be asking about assets of held in children's names? Well, families are planning the finances in a variety of ways, but specifically the formula for the institutional methodology that the profile is using is giving an allowance to families to protect their assets when they have younger children, to acknowledge that they do need to save. So if you're going to protect the assets for those children, then you actually need to know what the assets are. So that is why the information is requested. Another thing that's a very common question is people say, well, wait, why are you asking for retirement value? I didn't think that was part of the formula. And they're right, it is not part of the formula. The reason that the retirement value is asked is so that it's on people's mind that I'm putting the value of the retirement in this section. So when I'm asked a question about investments, I'm going to answer it distinctly. We're trying to make sure that we're bucketing information appropriately so that we can be clear what's excluded, what's included, for the benefit of determining a fair and equitable approach to family ability to pay. And this is why we do think that the profile provides us more tools and more resources to help families fairly. And again, the expenses are also critically important because we want to distinguish between families that have significant medical out-of-pocket medical expenses, dental expenses, and families that don't. That has a significant impact on families' ability to afford college. So the medical questions, they could be coming from a Schedule A. Families should be prepared to include the Schedule A if they're reporting that expense. Some schools may request it. The Schedule A is maybe not required in terms of filing with the IRS, but if families have filled that out, it could be a good supporting document. Certainly other documents may be utilized as well. If families have receipts for medical expenses paid, that can be used as well later. Another significant expense that families have are the private elementary, secondary expenses for tuition. Some schools are able to include that in their their calculation of a family's ability to pay. Some colleges can't. Also, education loan payments. Are families paying on educational loans for themselves? So these expenses are part of trying to serve families based on colleges' differing resources. The family data is very important. So, the family grid, again, lots of information. How many children do you have? What age are they? Where do they attend college? All these things are actually there to help families. So if you have a 2-year-old, then the protection for saving for them for college is going to be a little bit different than if you have a 17-year-old child, because more of your assets need to be protected for that. So the age of the children is very important. The type of college that a student is attending is important to know sort of the magnitude of the strain on families' resources. Student information about scholarships and whether they would be receiving benefits, tuition benefits from a parent's employer. Those resources are important to collect on the front end so that colleges and universities can give an award letter that is correct from the beginning. No one wants to receive an award letter to find out in August or September that tuition benefits are coming from an employer, and then that changes the financial aid package in a way that maybe families were not expecting. So having all this information up front makes sure, hopefully, that students are receiving a correct and accurate assessment of what the college can provide up front, and makes it so that they can make an informed decision. As I said, the explanation of special circumstances. There are key places in the application where students can say that they have special circumstances and add some descriptions for the college to basically better understand what's going on. So what I would say to families, I often say, if you have a special circumstance and you indicate that you have a special circumstance in terms of checking off one of the boxes, please add the detail of that. It doesn't really help us if we are looking at an application and someone says, yes, I've had a special circumstance of change in income, and I don't actually know what that is. Or I have this special circumstance in terms of an expense, but I'm supporting other family members, but then they don't say how they're supporting or what is the amount. So that's helpful. There is the ability for colleges to ask supplemental questions. If you've been a counselor for a long time, you may be familiar with a vast magnitude of these supplemental questions. And that really lengthened the process for students, because if they had 5 or 6 or 10 schools included in the profile, they could get a lot of extra questions if each college was asking even a few questions. So if that's your perspective, know that whole process has changed. The College Board has made significant effort to tailor those questions down, not make them available, integrate them into the application in other ways. And so there are significantly less questions. So yes, there still are some supplemental questions, but it is vastly improved from where it used to be. And that's important to highlight. The profile is a fee-based application. So much like the SAT, there's an initial fee of $25, and then to send the additional reports to additional colleges, it's $16. The non-custodial parent will only pay $25 once. So because of this, my suggestion is usually for families to wait to confirm that the student really does plan to apply to a college before they're paying to send the profile information to that college. But we're going to start talking about fee waivers because that policy has been expanded in many exciting ways. So the profile fee waiver, this means that students aren't even asked for financial payment information. And you may remember where in the past they still had to enter the information and then they found out they got the waiver later. All that is improved. So at the earliest point that that it can be determined that a student would qualify for the fee waiver, then they will be told, based on the answer to this question, you qualify for the fee waiver, and they get the assurance of moving through the remainder of the application, not worrying about how much is this going to cost me. So for families that have a household income of $100,000 or less, or they're an orphan, or they have that SAT fee waiver, they're going to be automatically granted. So something like, orphan or ward of the court, that question comes very early on in the application. So that fee waiver would happen. The income questions actually have been moved a little bit so that it could be a little bit sooner, but that will have to come there. And the other improvement is now that the fee waivers are available to both first year and transfer and returning and independent students. So that has been expanded. It's been expanded to an unlimited number of schools. It used to be limited. So the only limitation right now is that it's not available for international students. The fee waivers do not apply to international students from the College Board. However, fee payment codes can often be given from colleges and universities to international students for whom the cost of filing the profile would be a burden. And so the fee waiver would also apply to the non-custodial parents. So again, these fee payment codes, which are different than the fee waivers, are purchased by colleges, but they're also purchased by other community-based organizations, and they're given to the student. And they're only, so for colleges, if Amherst College gives a student a fee payment code, they can only use it to add Amherst College. So they can't use it to add another college. And so that code would pay for that submission. But students can use as many fee payment codes as they are given. When students submit it, it's always a good idea to review the information that has been submitted just to make sure that there were no mistakes, make sure that a number wasn't duplicated. Again, there are many prompts to make sure that common errors are avoided. And then they can check to certify that that information is correct. And it's really at then they'll also see whether or not that fee waiver has been applied. The dashboard really gives an opportunity across the top to really see where you are in the process, how far you have to go. So all of the different sections are there as well, and that hopefully is helpful to students. There's another new part of the profile application that was instituted in this past academic year, 2021-22, is that students can submit one time a correction, so one per application, and it's for very specific situations. So it's not the same as the FAFSA updates, where you can just go into the FAFSA pretty much anytime you want and make changes to submissions. It's really designed to correct very specific things. So if a parent answered a dependency question thinking of it from their own perspective and said, yes, I'm married, and they were supposed to be answering it from the student perspective, saying, no, I'm single. Those things that drive the dependency, those can be corrected. And when those are corrected, so if a student's correcting from independent to dependent, then the parent details will be presented so that they can add that information. Another very common thing is not including a business. So when families are reporting self-employment income, there is an extra check to make sure that the information includes business details. And so it is surprising sometimes at how many students or families say, I don't own a business. And then you look at their tax information and you realize, no, you really do own a business. We need this partnership return, or we need this corporate return. And so that can be corrected. But there certainly are situations where there's self-employment income on a Schedule C for consulting or for tutoring, or something where there really is not a business profile. And through that, students can just affirm, yes, this information is correct. You do have to wait for the application to be processed. So if you submit the application and 5 minutes later, you realize, oops, I made a mistake, you do have to wait for the cycle of that particular application to be submitted. And you can't add a college at the same time that you're making a correction for technical reasons, but there's no charge to submit a corrections, which is an important thing to be clear on. What happens from a college perspective is we get the data from the initial application, and then we get a subsequent file for the correction. We're able to integrate that into our systems, and then we're able to look at that information, and it's highlighted that there was a correction made, so we see that. So some colleges, not all colleges, but you want to look at that listing of the features by the colleges, do utilize the College Board's documentation service. And that allows us to collect, basically tax returns, sometimes family grids or verification forms. On our behalf, it's good for the student because they can just upload it in one place, and it can go to the multiple colleges. Some colleges will not use the IDOC system, and they may have a portal where students are uploading the information directly on their own portal. But it does provide a secure way to share information that colleges need. We do not want students sending tax forms over email. Email is not secure, and sending sensitive documents with personally identifiable information on it, we are trying to avoid that. So IDOC is good for schools that don't have their own upload portal. And again, as I said, it really just helps us make sure that we're getting comprehensive information so that we don't have to go back to families and ask a lot of questions in most cases. So they need to be in a specific format, JPEG, TIFF, PDF, but at least there are multiple formats that can be uploaded. And so there's a separate website. If a college utilizes the IDOC service, then after the profile is submitted, the student will get the request about that and how to log in and see on their dashboard. I will say that, yes, there's a dashboard, and yes, you can see on the IDOC site all the forms that were uploaded. You can see what is missing. So again, as colleges, we tell the College Board generally what kinds of forms we require, but I would recommend that students always go to the college's portal and look at the college's portal, not the IDOC portal, but their school portal, for the completeness, to determine the completeness of the application. Because there are situations where in a specific case, we can waive a document on our site and ask for something else. And so we can't necessarily customize the IDOC dashboard in quite the same way. Colleges do have the capability to go into the IDOC dashboard and customize it by the student, but really administrative bandwidth does not allow all of us to do that. So always recommend that students check their college and university's portal for documents that are still needed. And then if a document is needed, they still can go back to the IDOC site to upload it. But there certainly are, there's good customer support. Students and families can certainly reach out to colleges, but if they encounter struggles or wait times there, which hopefully they don't, they can also contact the College Board profile support as well. So there's lots of, I'm glad that you were with us today for this webinar, and hope it was helpful to earn some PDPs right from your desk or your home. There's lots of good resources on the MEFA website, specifically for counselors. There's a fantastic financial aid guide that I would point you to, but there are many other events that families can participate in a profile webinar, similar to what I did here today, but delivered by somebody else. And there's so many great social media resources. So wherever families receive their information, if they like podcasts or want to just do the small tweets, there's just lots of great information available. So I would love to hear what kind of questions have been coming in as we've been talking. We have a few minutes left, so would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So Gail, we did get one, and I wonder if you can just expand on this a little bit more. So this is going back to additional medical expenses that a family might have. So it says the CSS profile allows parents to include insurance premiums in addition to out-of-pocket expenses when reporting total medical expenses. So using the number reflected on a Schedule A, which does not capture premiums, isn't always an accurate depiction of medical expenses. So do you have any advice or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, generally the idea is that the purpose of asking that question is to identify families that have significant above and beyond what would be considered typical medical expenses. So the premiums, we do expect all families to have a certain percentage of their income going to medical expenses. So when the expenses are beyond that, then they would report them. So we have found the Schedule A usually to still be helpful to families because families are usually reporting it when they have significant out-of-pocket medical expenses that they've actually, paid. But I would say that if there's a family that also maybe has a high deductible plan, or expenses that are not on the Schedule A, they can certainly document that and talk with the specific college or university about that. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. So at this time, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. We can give folks another last push for questions because we do have, a good chunk of time left. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to enter them into the Q&A. We're happy to answer them live.
I am sure people have questions. I know I was talking fast and went through a lot of information, but I also know that the profile goes into a lot of depth. So I have no doubt that there are questions out there. One that I just thought of that I did not go into great detail about is reporting of the home. And so on reporting the home, because that's different than the FAFSA, families are asked to report the fair market value of the home. So if a family were, to list the home for sale, what is the fair market value? And then what is the debt on the home? And the debt that is on the home includes obviously a primary mortgage, but it can also include a home equity line of credit if that equity has been tapped, or a home equity loan. So if there is additional debt that has already been added to the home, that also should be reported. And many colleges, maybe not every single one of them, but many colleges are looking at the equity that is reported from families in alignment with their income. So for families that live in areas where home values are much higher than would be in comparison to their income, that's going to be adjusted and accounted for in many cases.
Great, thank you. I have one question that came up earlier in the presentation, and I wonder if you can just expand on this. I know many counselors have questions around ways to support undocumented students, and as they're completing the CSS profile, and I know we can spend a whole entire other session talking about this, but any advice or support for undocumented students as they're completing a CSS profile?
Again, I think it's great that we have the opportunity for the CSS profile to collect this information to support all of our students because they can't fill out the FAFSA. So this is a way that we as colleges are able to provide significant amounts of money to students who need it. In most cases, our undocumented students are of significant financial need. So, answering the questions to the best of their ability. They should know that there's not any risk to them that information is linked in any way, or anybody has outside entities have access to the financial information that they're providing on a private application to a private school. And even public schools that are collecting information from undocumented students. So in terms of specific advice, I think the experience of the application should be very similar. But I think the profile gives a little bit more flexibility in terms of not having to put in every detail or every personal information that doesn't exist. Whereas on the FAFSA you're kind of stopped a little bit more. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. So I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. What I will say for folks on today's webinar, if you have any, we just had one pop up. Oh, perfect timing. So this is one question for families who, and this is going a little off, but for families who don't want to complete the FAFSA because they're nervous it will impact admissions chances, will they be considered for merit aid if they submit the CSS profile? So in general, what advice do you have for families who are concerned that submitting a FAFSA would, impact admissions chances, and then would a CSS profile be able to be submitted for merit aid?
I guess I haven't heard the question in exactly that way. My advice is always to submit the applications, to submit both of the applications, the FAFSA and the profile, if you can't outright pay for an institution. If cost is no factor, then fine, don't fill out the applications. But if cost is any factor, then I think you should complete them, because sometimes merit aid is actually targeted toward families that are on the cusp of no need or are already deemed very low need. So there could be merit aid. I think colleges, in terms of admission, I guess if the question is, because usually colleges, students at some institutions may be more attractive if they have greater ability to pay. If the question is coming from a place of, I'm worried that our need looks too great to be considered for admission, it does nobody any good to be admitted if then you can't in any way, be afford to pay. And colleges, most colleges really need to know who they're admitting and what the financial needs of those students are so that they can serve all their students well. There are very few colleges that are need blind and meet full need. I'm exceptionally fortunate to work at one, and I know that, but I also have many colleagues that can't. And we are not serving students well by saying, oh, we would like to admit you, and then find out that a student needs significant financial support that the college just can't provide. So I think being kind of encouraging students to be honest and upfront. There are so many great colleges out there. There is a good match, and you all know that. You've been working for your students to help them find a good match all along. So whether that's good academic fit or good financial fit, get all the information on the table is my motto, and fill out the applications, be honest. If there is some resource that families have that, somebody will contribute significant amounts of money financially, then maybe that would be helpful in the application. The profile does ask questions about how much families are able to contribute and what kind of support from others will be contributed. Families should answer that in the context it was intended. So families should not answer that question thinking that they're going to be borrowing, or that, I will pay for it at all costs. To answer that question, what do you plan to contribute? Families really should be thinking about that. What can I afford to leverage from my income and my assets? So they shouldn't overestimate, and they really, shouldn't underestimate. I mean, we get a chuckle sometimes from families that are exceptionally well resourced in terms of their income, and they say, what do I want to pay for college? Oh, $5,000. That's unrealistic. Families should be realistic in what they think they can contribute reasonably per year, not for 4 years, per year. And likewise, if a family member has promised them, $5,000 per year for their child to go to college, they then can report that. So I hope that covers the gamut of potentially what was intended in that question.
That was very helpful. And with that question, they were really targeting for families who are pretty sure that they won't qualify for federal financial aid. And essentially, is it fine to not complete the FAFSA and still submit the profile?
Yeah, I mean, the FAFSA is actually easier than the profile. So what I would say to that is it's about determining completeness. So at Amherst College, we offer financial aid to families from, $10,000 of income all the way up to $350,000 of income. So yes, there are many families that aren't going to qualify for federal aid. But just in the system of determining who's ready to be read, we're not going to read a student if the FAFSA isn't part of the application. So yes, you definitely want to encourage students to submit both the profile and the FAFSA and any tax documents so that the application looks complete, and then we can review that application, and then we can offer, oftentimes we are offering just institutional resources, but we still have to have that federal application on file.
Great, thank you so much. That was very helpful. So we are getting down to our last minute. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, but what I will say is if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us here at MEFA. You can call us, or you can send us an email to collegeplanning@mefa.org. I want to thank you all. Thank you, Gail, for spending your morning with us and providing such helpful, crucial information for folks as we enter the financial aid application season.
Thank you, everybody.
And with that, I bid you all a wonderful morning. And Gail, again, thank you so much.